Stay free with Russell Brand. See it first on Rumble. What do you think are some of the more far out ideas that are likely to come out of this conference, Tim, and what kind of future does it infer?
Well, one of them is when you talked about kind of digital walling off of things, is an actual physical one within the cities. So I don't know if you've heard the notion of a 15-minute city. But actually in the program of this year's Davos, there's a session called Bold New Cities Take the Stage, in which they talk about 10-minute cities. So that's basically where the city is sectioned off. So you have quadrants, this is the Hunger Games kind of thing. So you got your sectors 12, 7, and all that, and you're not allowed to go outside that area. How do you control and monitor and either incentivize or coerce people into staying in their quadrants? Well, you need a digital identity as a foundation for that. And guess what? We've already got that technological foundation all set up through the last couple of years with these digital health certificates, aka vaccine passports. That set the stage because, in order to do anything, participate in society, access essential goods and services, that's what's going to be needed. So that's one of the crazy ones that's out there. That's been going on for a while, still continuing.
What I imagine is that once the technology exists to do something, almost the incentive exists to implement it. I suppose we have weapons that have been invented that have, thank God, not yet been used. But it's easy now to look at a kind of history of piloting and say, like, oh, look, that's where they tested that idea. When you said the stuff about the 10-minute city, I thought about like the kind of tags you wear if you're sort of convicted of tags that will buzz or inform people. And if we're all carrying digital IDs, then our actions and movements would be easier to monitor. And it seems to me that they're using the climate change narrative to introduce the possibility of lockdowns where ordinary people, not these guys who fly around on private jets, at a whim, will have travel restricted. And it seems as well that, and I'm even on Rumble, I'm not suggesting that the pandemic was not a legitimate biomedical event, but that you can see now how they have piloted the idea of lockdowns. Now it would be in countries like the UK and wherever it is you're living, Tim. At the beginning of the lockdown, they said, oh, in China they can lock people down because it's an authoritarian, centralized, communist country. You won't be able to pull that stuff off in Italy or the US or England, but they did. We just obediently did it. And all you have to do is condemn dissenters. If you smear dissenters as conspiracy theorists and whack jobs, and man, not that long ago, even if you were avowedly and overtly a conspiracy theorist, you're entitled to be in a conversation. You can have edgeland views, unusual opinions that needn't be hateful. So already in the conversations we've had today, we've talked about freedom of speech being calibrated. We've talked about the ability to scan people's consciousness and mental activity, the ability to monitor movement, the elimination of poverty, even a goal like that seems so sort of beautiful and fruitful and noble, being used as a way essentially to assert more regulation and control. So I suppose that's an interesting lens to use with the WEF. Look at the stuff they've been saying in the past and look at what things have subsequently been implemented. Look at the technologies that are being introduced and then imagine how they might be used. Now, even if you want to give people the benefit of the doubt and say, no, neoliberalist Western democracies don't have that kind of malevolent intent, well, what if things change? What if different centralized authority were ever to get that authority? And I would say the way that things are heading at the moment, it's kind of looking like that's the kind of dystopic vision we're moving towards anyway. What are you saying, Tim?
Yeah, well, you're exactly right about the narratives, before COVID and before the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum was pushing these policies for climate change, digital ID, limited mobility, climate refugees, things like that. And then once the pandemic came along, they just kind of transcribed all that climate stuff onto COVID. So instead of having climate lockdowns and things, you had health lockdowns and quarantines and things like that. And so now that the COVID control narrative is all but collapsed, they're moving right back into climate change. So that's where digital ID is going to be needed for all these climate refugees that they say are going to exist. There's what else? As Andrew mentioned earlier, the individual carbon footprint trackers. So measuring, what you're consuming, which is tied to digital ID. So it's like you go someplace and they say, well, you've eaten too much meat or you've bought too much meat. You can't have that. Petrol, gasoline, you can't use that. You have to switch to electric and all that. And so what it is creating that system of, behavior modification, which is a type of social credit system. It's all based on trying to incentivize, manipulate, or coerce human behavior.
It's very interesting. It seems that no matter what the problem is, the solution that will be presented is digital IDs, social credit scores, the ability to lock people down. So that's something we can watch for, isn't it? We can say, oh, wow, the problem used to be the pandemic and these were the solutions. And now the problem is pollution or climate change and these are the solutions.
And also, in a sense, some of what you're talking about carbon emissions and, a carbon foot tracker, if in a sense, for me personally, if I knew that as a collective, this was the only way that we were going to tackle some of the issues, to eat less meat so we all had to track what we ate, these were the only ways to tackle some of the issues that are facing this planet, and everyone was doing it. But then when you know that 71% of global emissions are caused by 100 of the biggest companies in the world, and they're getting tax breaks, they're represented at Davos by paying their money to be there and getting favorable decisions and colluding with governments. So, it's not them that's doing it, it is us. And this comes back to the hypocrisy that James was talking about.
That's brilliant, because they will only present solutions that do not meaningfully impact the agenda of the powerful. Solutions that hey, why don't we just shut down all of that type of fossil fuel and at great expense set up new systems of energy? We had a guest on the show the other week who told us that solar and wind could only meet 1/5 of our energy needs, even operating at maximum capacity. So it seems that there is some disinformation that comes out of that anyway, and we'll check that further. But yeah, one of the, I think, the great tools for examining this stuff is, are the solutions that they present never a challenge to the existing framework? They never say that we're going to break up these monopolies, we're going to democratize these workplaces, we're going to give you control of your communities. That these kind of solutions are never suggested. Stay free with Russell Brand. See it first on Rumble.